top 10 Heisman seasons ruined by injuries. Without further ado, let's begin our journey. Number 10, Tyrone Wheatley, Michigan, 1994. Wheatley was a star running back for the Wolverines who had won the Big Ten title in the Rose Bowl in 1993. He was a consensus All-American and finished fourth in the Heisman voting that year after rushing for 1,357 yards and 14 touchdowns. In 1994, he was expected to be a Heisman frontrunner along with Penn State's Kahane Carter and Colorado Rashaan Salam. However, Wheatley suffered a separated shoulder injury before the season opener against Boston College and missed the next two games. He returned to action against Colorado to have 17 carries for 50 yards and scored one touchdown. But this performance would be overshadowed by a 64-yard Hail Mary pass from Cordell Stewart and Michael Westbrook to win the game that would be dubbed the Hail Mary game. Wheatley finished the season with 849 yards and 11 touchdowns, but was overshadowed by Salam and Carter, who both rushed for over 1,500 yards and finished first and second in the Heisman voting, respectively. Wheatley's season also ended Michigan's chance to repeat as Big Ten champions after losing to Ohio State 22-6. Number 9, Johnny Bright, Drake, 1951. Bright was a versatile quarterback and halfback for the Drake Bulldogs, who played in the Missouri Valley Conference. He was the first African-American player to be named a first-team All-American and was the runner-up for the Heisman Trophy in 1950 after leading the nation in total offense with 2,400 yards. In 1951, he was the favorite to win the Heisman as he averaged 236 yards per game in the first 5 games of the season. However, in a game against Oklahoma A&M, Bright was the victim of a brutal and racially motivated attack by a white defender, who broke his jaw with a punch. The incident was captured by a Pulitzer Prize-winning photo sequence and sparked national outrage. Bright missed the rest of the game and played only one more game that season with a wired jaw. He finished the season with 975 yards and 6 touchdowns and placed 5th in the Heisman voting. The attack also ended Drake's hopes of a conference title as they finished with a 5-3-1 record. Number 8, Mark Ingram, Alabama, 2010. Ingram was the first of only a couple Heisman winners in Alabama history. After leading the Crimson Tide to a national championship in 2009, he rushed for 1,658 yards and 17 touchdowns, and also caught 32 passes for 334 yards and 3 scores. He was the overwhelming favorite to repeat as the Heisman winner in 2010 and to lead Alabama to another title. However, Ingram suffered a knee injury in the preseason practice and had to undergo arthroscopic surgery. He missed the first 2 games of the season and returned to action against Duke, where he rushed for 151 yards and 2 touchdowns. However, he was not the same dominant player as he was in 2009 and struggled against some of the tougher defenses in the SEC. He finished the season with 875 yards and 13 touchdowns. He was not even invited to the Heisman ceremony. His injury also affected Alabama's chances of defending their title, as they lost 3 games and finished 4th in the SEC West. Number 7, Sam Bradford, Oklahoma, 2009. Bradford was the Heisman winner in 2008 after throwing for 4,720 yards and 50 touchdowns with only 8 interceptions. He led the Sooners to a 12-1 record and a berth in the BCS National Championship game, where they lost to Florida. Bradford decided to return for his junior season in 2009 and was a preseason favorite to win the Heisman again and to lead Oklahoma to another title shot. However, in the season opener against BYU, Bradford suffered a shoulder injury after being sacked and had to leave the game. He missed the next 3 games and returned to play against Baylor, where he threw for 389 yards and a touchdown. However, he re-injured his shoulder in the next game against Texas and had to undergo season-ending surgery. He finished the season with 562 yards and 2 touchdowns and placed 11th in the Heisman voting. His injury also doomed Oklahoma's season as they finished with an 8-5 record, won against Stanford in the Sun Bowl 31-27. Number 6, Adrian Peterson, Oklahoma, 2006. Peterson was one of the most dominant running backs in college football history and was a Heisman finalist in his freshman year in 2004 when he rushed for 1,925 yards and 15 touchdowns. He followed that up with 1,108 yards and 14 touchdowns in his sophomore year despite battling injuries. In his junior year, he was expected to challenge for the Heisman and to lead Oklahoma to a national title. He started the season strong, rushing for 935 yards and 10 touchdowns in his first 6 games, and setting a school record with 32 consecutive 100-yard games. However, In a game against Iowa State, Peterson broke his collarbone while diving into the end zone for a touchdown. He missed the rest of the regular season and returned only for the Fiesta Bowl against Boise State, where he rushed for 77 yards and a touchdown. He finished the season with 1,012 yards and 12 touchdowns and placed 7th in the Heisman voting. His injury also hurt Oklahoma's chances of winning the Big 12 and the national title as they lost to Texas and Oregon in the regular season and to Boise State in a thrilling overtime game in the Fiesta Bowl. Number 5. Damien Anderson, Northwestern, 2001. Anderson was the star running back for the Wildcats, who had won the Big Ten title in the Citrus Bowl in 2000. He was the consensus All-American and finished 5th in the Heisman voting that year after rushing for 1,914 yards and 22 touchdowns. He also set several school and conference records for the Big Ten. In 2001, he was expected to be a Heisman frontrunner, along with Nebraska's Eric Crouch and Florida's Rex Grossman. However, Anderson suffered a left shoulder injury in the Week 8 game against Indiana and missed the remainder of the season. He started the season off not being as effective as a runner as he was in 2000 and struggled to find running lanes behind a depleted offensive line. He finished the season with 757 yards and 8 touchdowns and was not even a finalist for the Heisman. His injury also cost Northwestern a chance to repeat as Big Ten champions as they finished the season with a 4-7 record and a loss to Illinois in the final game of the season. Number 4. Michael Vick, Virginia Tech, 2000. Vick was a sensational quarterback for the Hokies, who had led them to an undefeated regular season and a berth in the BCS National Championship game in 1999. He was a Heisman finalist that year after throwing for 1,840 yards and 12 touchdowns, and rushing for 585 yards and 8 touchdowns. He also dazzled fans with his speed, agility, and arm strength, and was considered the most exciting player in college football. In 2000, he was the favorite to win the Heisman and to lead the Virginia Tech to another title shot. He started the season strong, throwing for 186 yards and 2 touchdowns, and rushing for 102 yards and another 2 touchdowns in a 52-23 win over Akron. However, in the 8th game against Pittsburgh, Vick sprained his right ankle, and had to leave the game. He pushed through the injury and returned to play against Miami the following week, where he threw for 9 yards and 1 interception and rushed for 5 yards, but could not prevent the Hokies from losing 41-21, as well as remaining on the sideline for the second half of the game because of the injury. He finished the season with 1,234 yards and 8 touchdowns passing, and 617 yards and 8 touchdowns rushing, and placed 6th in the Heisman voting. His injury also ended Virginia Tech's hopes. Number 3, Blake Corum, Michigan, 2022. Corum is a dynamic running back for the Wolverines, who had emerged as a star in his sophomore year in 2021. He rushed for 952 yards and 11 touchdowns. He also caught 24 passes for 141 yards and 1 touchdown, and returned 12 kickoffs for 304 yards and an average of 25 yards a touch, earning him the nickname Speedy Corum. In 2022, he was expected to be a Heisman frontrunner along with young Ohio State's CJ Stroud and USC's Caleb Williams. He started the season on fire, rushing for 901 yards and 13 touchdowns in the first 7 games. He also led Michigan to a 7-0 record and a top 5 ranking. However, in the game against Illinois, Corum suffered a knee injury that took him out the rest of the game. He tried to give it a go against Ohio State for the only 2 carries before feeling some discomfort. He later found out he had a torn ACL and had to miss the rest of the season. He finished the season with 1,463 yards and 18 touchdowns, and placed 7th in the Heisman voting. His injury also derailed Michigan's chances of winning the national title as they beat Purdue in the Big Ten title game and lost to TCU in the Fiesta Bowl college football playoff semifinals. Number 2, Hendon Hooker, Tennessee, 2022. Hooker was a transfer quarterback from Virginia Tech who had won the starting job for the Volunteers in 2021. He had a breakout year, throwing for 2,945 yards and 31 touchdowns, with only 3 interceptions. He also ran for 616 yards and 5 touchdowns and led Tennessee to a 7-6 record and a loss to Purdue in the Music City Bowl. He missed out on an All-SEC selection and finished outside the top 10 of the Heisman voting that year, behind the likes of Alabama's Bryce Young, who won the award. In 2022, he was expected to be a Heisman contender, along with young Ohio State's CJ Stroud and USC's Caleb Williams. He outdid the previous season even better, throwing for 3,135 yards and 27 touchdowns with only 2 interceptions. Also ran for 430 yards and 5 touchdowns and led Tennessee to an 11-2 record and a top 10 ranking. He was the front runner for the Heisman until the unfortunate torn ACL injury he suffered during the fourth quarter of a 63-38 loss to South Carolina. He missed the rest of the season and finished 5th in the Heisman voting behind Caleb Williams, who was the Heisman winner. His injury was the culmination of a Tennessee season that lost its chances to win the SEC East and the SEC title, as they lost to Georgia in Week 10 and the before-mentioned South Carolina in Week 12. Number 1, Leon Michael Hart, Michigan, 2007. Hart was a phenomenal running back for the Wolverines, who had been a Heisman finalist in his junior year in 2006, when he rushed for 1,562 yards and 14 touchdowns, despite missing 3 games due to injury. He was a consensus All-American and finished 5th in the Heisman voting that year behind Ohio State's Troy Smith, who won the award. In 2007, he was expected to be a Heisman frontrunner along with Arkansas's Darren McFadden, West Virginia's Pat White, and Missouri's Chase Daniel. He started the season strong, rushing for 1,136 yards and 12 touchdowns and catching 7 passes for 43 yards in his first 9 games. He also led Michigan to a 6-1 record and a top 5 ranking after recovering from a shocking loss to Appalachian State in the season opener. He was the favorite to win the Heisman and had a chance to seal it in the game of the season against Ohio State. However, during the middle of the game, Hart suffered an ankle injury and had to leave the game. He missed the rest of the regular season and finished 3rd in the Heisman voting behind Tim Tebow, who won the award, and McFadden, who was the runner-up. His injury also cost Michigan a chance to win the Big Ten and national title, as they lost to Ohio State and Wisconsin in the regular season and beat Florida in the Capital One Bowl. That concludes our video on the top 10 Heisman seasons ruined by injuries. We hope you enjoyed it and learned something new. If you did, please like, share, and subscribe to our channel for more videos like this. Also, let us know in the comments what you think of our list, and if you have any suggestions for future topics. Thank you for watching, and see you next time. This is Triple Play Sports Talk, signing out.